Welcome back, everyone, to our Career Breakthrough Summit Day 2. We've had 7 excellent sessions over the past 2 days, and now this is your opportunity to ask your questions with our absolutely fantastic panel we've got today. Now, you've already met Ed and Theodora earlier today with their wonderful sessions, but we're also welcomed with Jessie Jackson, who is joining our panel today, the fantastic Jessie Jackson. Jessie, on that note, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself for our audience today?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Paul, for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you all. My name is Jessie Jackson. I'm a training coach here at Coaching Minds. So initially just started my program. My background is ex-service member, and now I'm in education, in further education specifically.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jessie. Ed, Theodora, for those who haven't had a chance to catch your session just yet, would you like to introduce yourselves? Ed, I'm going to go over to you first.
Yeah, of course, Paul. Thank you. Great to see everyone today and looking forward to the session ahead. My name is Ed. I go by Coach Ed, so I'm a leadership and mindset coach. Similar to Jessie, I also am part of the Coaching Minds trainee course, but I do have a certificate in coaching with neuroscience. And similar to Jessie, I work now in the higher education space as well. So I'm looking forward to the back and forth discussion today that we'll have. So yeah, that's who I am. Great to meet everybody.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ed. And Theodora, we're going to go over to you, somebody who hasn't got working in the higher education space. Would you like to give a brief introduction to everybody today?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Theodora. I'm a manager at the People Consulting department of EY based in Cyprus, so Ernst & Young. So my focus is learning and development, especially in organizations and the corporate environment, but without limiting that to like individuals and students as well. So yeah, I'm very interested to see our discussion today.
Brilliant. So we've got a diverse range of experiences and expertise in the panel today. So if you're tuned in, please say hi. This is your opportunity to ask your questions. The topic for today is where to find and secure new roles, especially in today's volatile employment environment. I can see we've got Donna tuned in. Donna, it's great to see you here. Thank you for being here today. And if you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments box. So Ed, I'm going to go over to you to open up today's session. You've just done an absolutely fantastic session for us earlier today on stepping in to management. But one thing we didn't talk about and we haven't actually discussed at all in our Career Breakthrough Summit is networking. How important do you think networking is in today's environment? And if people are maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable, what tips or strategies would you do to kind of, in terms of their authenticity, to step into networking?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really important topic as well to touch into, and I do think at times we do forget to really bring that out. Not here at Coaching Minds, but in general. Because for me, networking is really just about having human conversations, and it's about breaking down those kind of fears of what traditionally we see as networking, going into a room with business cards, trying to do a pitch, trying to get job A, B, C, and D. That's not what true networking is about. And somebody who has recently just left LinkedIn in leadership, and the platform itself is based around how you can connect and network with people. That's key, right, as we move forward. I suppose now working in higher education, one gap I did see when I did join higher education, and similar to Theodora, I do have a background in learning and development, so would have created a lot of different programs to help corporate people to look at things in a different angle. But when I went into the university setting or the graduate setting, one thing they're not really prepared for or kind of have workshops on is networking. But it's one of the main things that we ask of them in their first job, right? We get them to connect with person A, person B, person C, person D. We ask them to do different kind of functions in that particular role, but we don't set them up for that success in a university or graduate setting. So it's something that I'm very much focusing on in the institute that I work in, and making sure that people are getting out to events, connecting with people. And I suppose, Paul, back to your original question, how important is it? I think it's important now more than ever, for a number of factors, right? I'm based here in Dublin, Ireland, which would be considered the kind of the ecosystem for tech hubs. We have every tech company in the world sitting here within Dublin, and within that space, even though Ireland is small, we need to make sure that we're connecting. And in the landscape where, there's a lot of uncertainty with job layoffs, with employment, with the disruption of AI, etc., etc. I think networking will always bring us back to just that human factor and that human conversation, right? And the more we build those skills out. But I do get it from people when I do ask in a workshop setting, can you give me some kind of words or feelings when it comes to networking? I always hear fear. I always hear I don't want to boast or talk about myself. I always hear oh, it's just about handing business cards. I always hear it's about mingling. And there's elements of that within there. But I suppose for me, if you break down a lot of those kind of pillars into just, it's about having a conversation, and the only expectation for you should be being curious about the person that you're talking in front of you. Not will this land me a job, not will this. That could happen as a byproduct 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 conversations down the line, but the first conversation should just be really curious about the individual and having that two-way conversation. But again, they're just my insights. They're my kind of views working in this landscape. But I'd also love to hear Theodora and Jesse how they feel, because I think it's good to get different perspectives from different industries, how networking is kind of seen.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. I just a quick follow up on that, Ed. I really like that perspective with regards to networking being a human connection, especially as we move forward with AI and we become, while social media and everything else is designed to make us more connected, we are becoming more disconnected as human beings. So I really like that perspective about using networking as a way of connecting with people as it was intended. I suppose my question to yourself would be, how do we help individuals navigate that networking space with work in mind? If we're saying it's about connecting with people, how do we encourage them to navigate effectively that networking space with people in mind, but also balancing looking for work as well? Because I think that's equally as important.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jesse. I suppose it's that balance piece, right? You are in that space, and the spaces are created for networking, for employability, for getting to know companies and organizations. But I suppose the mindset shouldn't be for what we talk about, instant gratification, where when you go in and have the first conversation that you're going to land a job, right? It's about building up that rapport, leaning into your human skills, which is, communication, relationship building. These are all key as we move into this new world of AI. And AI will disrupt a lot of things, but it'll never take away that cognitive and those human skills that we would deal with. So what I say to especially graduates, because I work with them and they come from a different generation maybe than myself or yourself or Theodore or Paul, and they teach us a lot, and they really share some insights, is that they can feel uncomfortable stepping into these spaces because they don't know what to say or they don't know how to start the conversations. And I always just say, well, everyone else is in the same boat, right? So it's not about coming out with a big statement. It's just about easing yourself into it. But you need to be comfortable in those situations. That's why it brings the authenticity. But at the same time, the environment is set up for you now to network. So the more you network and go to career events, go to employer events, etc., the more you get to know what you're actually looking for when it comes to an employability piece. But you're also checking, is the culture that's at that company suited for you as well, and that's part of the networking piece. So it is a challenge, right? Because there is, if you want to look at an outcome, the outcomes of network is traditionally being for a result. What is the result? Is a new connection, is a new business, is a job, etc. But the more you, from my opinion, the more you build those connections and those human connections, you just don't know what doors can be opened, or the person sitting beside you, what opportunity they can present. So I use LinkedIn a lot, and I've made so many great connections on LinkedIn that I haven't necessarily ever met in person, but I've met them online, and you can still make those fantastic connections and create opportunities. That's how I see it. But Jesse, if you see elements slightly different, I'd love to hear. Theodora, coming from EY and coming from Cyprus and that space, you might see things slightly different, because I do work with a lot of South American graduates and students, and they find certain platforms, because they don't use them in their home countries, they find them very challenging when they come to Ireland, because within Ireland, 80 to 90% of recruiters use LinkedIn. So, and that's a networking space, and it's a new mindset that a lot of people have to get into.
I think I definitely agree with you, but and I really like the perspective of like the new generation. I'm probably still in the new generation. It wasn't that long since I was in university, but I think what's important and what we've noticed is that people have a difficulty to start. So it's what you said actually. So I think that a space where some kind of more structured to networking is given is helping a lot of people develop. For example, I remember when I was going at my seniors program at EY, and there were people from all around the world being brought together, and they told us network is a really good opportunity because you don't know what to say. Something that I found, for example, very useful is that they sat us on tables at dinner that were different than the people we came in. So we had assigned seats, and we had an exercise of you have to share one thing about, like, you have to find one thing you have similar with the people in the group before like the main course comes in, and then when the second one, again, you have to do some sort of little things of relationship building, because I agree with you, it's not about landing something, it's about that relationship building and networking. And then that structure helped me, and then I joined with someone who then talk to me about, we have this project, would you like to jump on? And then that's how we connected and we got to work together on a project. So I think the new generation kind of would like some more structure in terms of, the networking being a little bit more, how do we start, or having to put them into conversations. That's why when they're training as well is really good, because they have to talk through the exercises and stuff like that and start themselves in building that network.
Yeah, I could just jump in there, Paul, quickly, because I do love that angle that Theodore brought in. Because, you know, sometimes when we look at networking, we look at through the lens of it's purely for extroverts, right? Who go into the room and are very confident in how they show themselves and display themselves. But Theodore, what you mentioned is that starting point, and that's what we hear a lot as well from graduates. I don't know how to start the conversation, or what do I say when I go in. But if we create those spaces, and I see now they bring, over the last couple of months and years that we work in here, speed dating into networking, where you sit with somebody for 30 seconds and then you move on, you move on, you move on. That kind of breaks that initial ice of, oh, we go into a big room and just have to connect and the loudest voice wins, right? That's not the case anymore. So I love the way you brought that and showcased that. So sorry, Paul, I just wanted to highlight that piece.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Ed shared there, Theodore, I love your angle, because we're talking about networking here from a perspective of an individual, as I get my words right, as an individual stepping into that space. But equally, recruiters, those who are hosting networking events, need to think about how they set that up, how they create that psychological safety, how they invite everybody in that space. And I really love your point, Ed, around curiosity. One of the biggest mindset shifts for me personally, when I came out of uni, I was, what can I get from these networking events? But now when I go, that mindset shift is, what can I give? What can I give when I go to that networking event? And it's just opened up so many doors, so many opportunities. I've met so many amazing people by just making that small shift. But let's steer away from networking. And Theodore, I'm going to come back to you, because I've got an interesting question. You've just delivered a fantastic hour session on the future of work. And you touched a little bit on this throughout that session. But just for the benefit of everybody who's tuned into the panel right now, what would you say companies are looking for these days when recruiting?
So, okay, so I love this question because we are moving away from the traditional way of recruiting and of getting a role, which was, what kind of degree do you have? What kind of university did you go to? And all of those things. And we're moving towards a more skills-based approach, which is, what can you do? So I think we see that shift, and we see that the importance when you go in to the interview stage, or even your CV goes in, or any other process you go into, which is why development centers and assessment centers have become a thing, is because people want to assess your skills, because they want to see skills like communication. How good are you at communication? How easily can you adapt? How easily can you learn? And those kinds of skills, which are transferable, by the way, for each and every role that you're going to go through your life, are becoming more important than any degree you've ever had, or at some point any experience you could have had, because it's not only the years of experience, how does that experience apply, or what transferable skills has it taught you that will benefit the next role that you're stepping into. And it's your kind of challenge to show these people those transferable skills, and it's either going to be through an assessment center, through a case study, or even through just having a conversation. How can you showcase your skills rather than your degrees and certificates? And I think that's a really good shift, but I think our companies they still need to move a bit faster, in the sense that they're still ticking boxes on their CVs, because they have to start from somewhere. So they're still ticking boxes in terms of what kind of degree you have, but they are moving towards the skill-based approach more, which I think it's a very, very good thing.
Excellent. Ed, Jesse, anything you'd like to add to that? You similar thoughts around that?
No, I think you've touched on something there that's I've been thinking about in regards to how you go about, I think it reflects on what Ed was saying there about networking as well. It's when you step into the room and you're new to networking, how you bring in your best version of self into that space where you're not just a person that's ticking a box. You aren't a box, and you're not trying to tick a box, but you want to demonstrate those skills and competencies that you have. And it's good to hear about employers are shifting that mindset away from just degrees, etc., because that doesn't always demonstrate the capability of an individual. And often we can overlook core competencies of those who may not necessarily possess those ratified qualifications when they step into that space. It's really good to hear about that we're making that gradual shift, but it's positive.
Yeah, no, it's quite similar, singing from the same hymn sheet. What I have noticed over the last 12 to 24 months, and obviously working in the corporate space before that as a hiring manager as well, is there's definitely more focus now moving forward on what I like calling the human skills. How can an individual demonstrate communication, leadership, relationship, um, critical thinking, and judgment, especially in the era of AI? Like, AI is a fantastic tool, and I'm a real advocate for it. And I think the way we should look at it from a mindset would be that it's a co-order, or a co-employee. It's there to assist and help you, but at the same time, it doesn't have that cognitive approach, right? So it can show empathy, can show compassion, doesn't necessarily show judgment all the time. Even though it's filled with facts and figures, it doesn't necessarily do that. So individuals will want to know how to use AI, and that's what a lot of companies are looking for in those different spaces. But they really want to differentiate through the human skills. What can you bring to the table, right? When it comes to how do you make an impact, how do you show value, how do you use your judgment, and these are all those human skills. And the main human skill that I constantly keep hearing, and it's a team, and it's something I've developed workshops on, is adaptability, right? It can also be change or uncertainty, because as we go through the next year or two with AI, what I like to call the disruptive space, because we don't know what AI will do in 3 or 6 months' time, right? And Jesse, probably you're aware of this in the higher education space. That's a bit of a challenge, right? Because you can't create frameworks and help graduates move forward, or masters in AI. They're not there yet, because we still don't know where that space will be in 6 to 9, 12 months. But what we can do is bringing in an awareness, and there's other ways that we can help with your degrees, etc., is by bringing in kind of work-based learning opportunities. So there's a combination of both. So graduates are getting skills, but also getting human skills and getting the opportunity to work. I suppose that's not for every sector, right? When we talk about human skills, and I always bring it back to, if I had surgeons doing some work on me, I really want them to be technically skilled. I don't really mind what their human skills are like in relation to communication or maybe relationship building. I really want them to be able to do the job that is at hand. But when it comes to some of the spaces that we talked about or worked in, technical skills were always that tick boxing exercise. Can you do A, B, C, or D? Now it's very much like, well, AI will be able to assist with that, but can you make critical thinking? Can you have the judgment to look at the data and make the right calls that can help the business to move forward, etc., etc. So I don't know if Theodora or Jesse don't see things slightly that way. I love this topic and this piece of conversation. So happy to kind of delve a little bit more into this. Or maybe Paul, you have a different view of it as well from a coaching background. So
I think if we had an academic here, it would be a very different conversation because they would definitely not be happy tackling their uni degrees, and I've had that conversation. But I think something interesting that you had mentioned was about the doctor, which I think is important still. But what happens? What I am wondering is what happens when you have a robot that can do the precise procedure of the doctor, like you would need him maybe to have the critical thinking or the technical knowledge of how does that machine will perform the precise thing that maybe I have experience on doing or not have experience on doing, and you'll need the critical thinking of analyzing those things and making sure like it chooses the right thing. So again, even that profession is going to evolve to we don't know what yet. So it's very interesting for me to see even those professions where they go.
yeah, it's a great point, and as I said, we're probably not there yet on that kind of conversation. Other than, I personally believe a human and a cognitive decision needs to be in part of the process. Doesn't mean that the robot can't do A, B, or C, but they can't be in charge of the full process. Because,
Agreed.
like, if you just keep it to the example of the surgery, you sign a waiver when you go in because anything can happen in any type of surgery, right? So it doesn't mean that you can do from A to B and get it 100% right. Something can happen. Same with, these cars that drive by themselves, they still have errors, et cetera, et cetera. So there always needs to be a human in part of that process. I think at the moment, there's a lot happening because everyone's trying to get to the market as quickly as possible with AI, and they're trying to make sure that they're adapting. But that doesn't mean that the end product at the moment will be the product in 6, 12, 24 months' time. That's just my view.
And I think that links nicely to what you were saying in your last session, Theodore. You mentioned about the analogy of everybody needs to jump on this train. And the later that we jump on the train, the harder it's going to be. But we need to make sure that we're getting on the right train. And one thing I just want to pick up, I'm glad that we brought in AI. And I think the shift in the more importance towards assessment centers and looking at those skills is because I think we can predict in the future that the majority of CVs are going to be written by AI. We can all go into ChatGPT, we can all go into DeepSeek, Claude, whatever we use, and actually ask them to write our CV in a professional way. So how do we could show that what people are using, what they're writing, how they present themselves on paper actually matches how they can perform in person. So it's a really interesting point. And I just want to also pick on the bit you mentioned about universities. I think universities need to come with a bit more of an open mindset. It's not that we're saying university degrees are going to be worthless in the future, which I've heard a lot of people say. It's how do universities change the way in which they assess their individuals? How do they change the degrees in which they're teaching? How do they change the way in which they're set up so they can hone on these skills and help and educate people on the skills that they need? But I want to steer the conversation a little bit further. I want to hear more from Jesse. Now, Jesse, you've gone through a very large and major transition from a high-performing environment into the space of higher education. And I'm sure there's many people that are tuned in today that have maybe gone through that transition or have gone through transition or thinking about going through that transition. So I just want to know a little bit more about where did it begin for you and what were your first steps in that transition?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. I'm just going to make a slight correction there. Whilst I appreciate being in higher education is absolutely fantastic, my current background is further education. So that's that gap between between school leavers and going on to university. But the experiences that Ed has sort of highlighted is the same issues that we're facing from a further education standpoint as well. So very much mirrored at our level. And so to answer your question there, Paul, yes, it's a significant transition from military service into public life, as it were. I spent 12 and a half years in the Royal Artillery. I left Royal Artillery on a medical discharge. So it was I had to pivot extremely quickly into civilian life based on the time that I had left in service. And fortunately for me, I was guided well. So to answer your question, my journey began from in Aldershot in Surrey in England, and I stumbled into education by means of what do I do next? Where do my skill sets lie? What am I good at? And at the time, I was a troop sergeant training instructor at ATC Purbright, so that allowed me to transition effectively using the instructional skills that I developed into education. And so when I think about that, it's how does an individual that is transitioning from service into civilian life, how do they make that adaptation or that transition well? And there's a few things that come to mind that I had experienced through my transition, whilst it was a very quick pivot, and quite a few of it Theodora and Ed's already touched on. One thing that I wish I'd known prior to transitioning out of service was how to effectively network. Most people that are transitioning out of service that's not within a medical discharge realm, as I was, that are transitioning through natural discharge or end of service, they'll have time to network and develop those skills. So I would strongly encourage, if you're transitioning out of service, to begin and practice that networking capability, because as Ed has highlighted, that's a significant tool that enables you to connect with people outside of service and to ready yourself to what civilian life is like. And then moving on to sort of some of the key points that Theodora and Ed had mentioned, I've just written them down here. When you're transitioning out of service, it's really important that you're demonstrating the skills that you've learned, some of those core competencies that you've developed over your period of time in service. And two core tenets there are your adaptability and your critical thinking skills. Those two skills in of themselves are, as Theodora and Ed has highlighted, are significant. And service personnel have those skills in abundance, especially if they've served a significant number of years in service. And when I say service, I'm making note of the Army, the Navy, and the RAF. That's what forms the Army, the service branches in the UK Armed Forces. And so once you transition out, as I say, there early days in adapting with networking. Ed has mentioned previously about utilizing LinkedIn. Similarly, here in the UK, a lot of businesses and organizations use LinkedIn as a means of business to business, identifying skills, showcasing your core competencies. One of the things, as we're thinking there, how do we demonstrate to employers outside of the box ticking exercises that we can bring these competencies to the table? I would say build a portfolio. Use LinkedIn as a portfolio builder, to demonstrate those core skills that you have in abundance. Use LinkedIn as your organic portfolio builder. Start to follow individuals that you're familiar with, or the industries that you would like to get into. Attend those networking events. There are quite a lot of networking events, again, specifically to UK, that are free. And I think those are good ways those are soft entry points to develop those networking skills, as it were, especially those that are free. And as I say there, utilize LinkedIn and utilize some of the other social media platforms such as Substack or Reddit to track and what's the word I'm looking for there? Showcase some of the skills and things that you've been doing over a period of time in readiness. You don't want to leave it too late, because if you leave it too late, by the time you transition out, you haven't demonstrated and given yourself enough time to those industries that are looking to recruit service leavers. And also to know, when looking at industries that are promoting service leavers or wanting to engage with service leavers, recognizing those core skills and competencies are there. You're looking for industries that are part of the Armed Forces Covenant, which is specific to the UK. So these are industries or organizations that look favorably onto armed forces personnel that are transitioning out. It's not a guaranteed job interview. It's not a guaranteed job, but it's those industries that are saying we recognize some of the core skills that you have, that you could bring to the table. None of it is guaranteed, but those industries and organizations exist, and they vary from silver, bronze, and gold. The higher up they are, as if they're a gold provider, they've done, they're a true friend of the armed services. And I sort of a final note there before I hand it back to the floor is, if you choose not to demonstrate those core skills and competencies, no one will know. So it's important that you showcase what you are capable of doing. Listen to the guidance that's available to you, some of the transition partnership providers, attend all the free fairs that the service provides to you. But more importantly, you really do have to build that portfolio and engage early days with those organizations that you wish to transition into, and look at organizations that are providing apprenticeships or sort of gateways into specific areas, such as education, such as finance, such as project management, and even to some instances, home builders, people that build homes, so project managers and sort of things like that. But yeah, so that's what I'd say to look out for those that are transitioning out of service.
I think it's very interesting what Jess is saying, because I recently recruited someone who, so we do assessment centers and recruitments for other companies, not for EY. And I've recently passed through an assessment, a person who actually went out of service for the army and wanted to get a different kind of role. And they came in for customer service at a telecommunications company, and we had to interview them and role play with them, and I was playing their customer and all of those things, and we had to notice their competencies in order to recruit them. And I gave the go ahead because I could see exactly what you're saying, Jesse, those transferable skills. So I could see the discipline, I could see how he read before he came to know the different products, so preparedness, discipline. I could see the communication, also in the sense of like he could handle me being mad, and that's a very good thing when it comes to customer service skills. Another transferable skill that I observed there, and it was coming from his previous experience. So I think what you're saying, Jesse, it's really important, and it poses the, not the question, but for everyone, the thinking of your next role may be something you never even imagined doing. So you should be open to that, because those transferable skills can get you anywhere.
Absolutely. And there was just a question that was flagged there quickly, with regards to volunteering is a good gateway into civilian life. 100%. Well, as I transitioned out, I also volunteered within education in order to complete my training. And that was a fantastic opportunity, not only to secure work, but also to understand the expectations of civilian life. Because, a lot of service leavers would have spent, in the vast majority of cases, would have joined service as from a teenager and had left as a late adult. So vast majority of their informed adult years were spent in a very structured, very catered for environment, and to move out of that where, you're responsible for paying your bills and all these different things that might, we now take as for advantage. Volunteering and moving into the sort of civilian life helps to make that transition a little bit more manageable and more effective, rather than it being sort of flash to bang, as it were.
Yeah, just to chime in, Paul, and just the points that Jesse made and Theodora, just like to lean into maybe the points Jesse made in relation to transferable skills, especially if you're coming from the armed forces sector. What I loved hearing over the last couple of months, I read recently Gareth Southgate's book about Dear England. I don't know if anybody else in the room or online has, but he would be considered a real people leader, and has a great connection with his team and leadership and humans, etc. And he talks about how he models a lot of his coaching and his leadership style off the RAF leadership modules, because they really lean into empathy, really lean into empowerment, and really lean into psychological safety. So why I bring this up, Jesse, is because sometimes what I find, especially working with graduates and international professionals who are working and living in Ireland now, but originally not from Ireland, don't necessarily tell their full story. And that's where I think a lot of people fall down, is that these transferable skills, Jesse, that you're talking about can also be looked at from people that work in customer support, customer service, food services, because they're at the front, the front of the business, helping customers, being able to use decision making. But maybe that's not necessarily the field that they want to be in. They may be working there because of visa restrictions, etc., etc. And they feel maybe they've done 10 or 15 years back in their home country in HR or senior leadership, and they feel putting, a task that they may feel or employment that's not relevant shouldn't be part of their story or their CV. I'm actually in the opposite opinion of that. I think that should be very much front and center, because that shows your adaptability, it shows your resilience, it shows your upskilling. For me, you don't want to allow a recruiter who I've been and a hiring manager to make up the story or make up the assumptions or to fill in the gaps. You want to be able to make sure that you're filling those gaps in yourself, even if that's a career break, etc., etc. So the power is in telling your story. So what really touched on was when you talked about those transferable skills, because I do see a lot of people when they do come to me saying that I haven't got like opportunities, and when I look through their CV, it's like, because you're not really telling me your story. You're not telling me your impact. You're not telling me the value that you can bring. And also you're leaving out part of your story. And then just on the volunteering piece, I think that is really important. And it's something that we don't step into enough. A lot of recruiters, hiring managers and leaders look at people who volunteer because it shows a set of skills also. It shows that you're willing to go outside of the norm. You're willing to take on extra responsibilities. You care about society. So, diversity and inclusion, and there's, it's a different part of your personality, but you're showcasing your personality through your volunteering as well. So great question from Donna, and I know Jesse added to that. So just wanted to share just those transferable pieces because I think they're really, really important as we move forward.
And I think what we've discussed there, just bringing the 2 points from Theodore and Ed together, Jesse, for a bit of a follow-up question for you, if you don't mind. Ed talks about transferable skills. Theodore has mentioned how she observed the skills that a military applicant had in her organization. And I can imagine that as 12 and a half years in the military, you've gained a distinct set of skills that sometimes maybe civilian organizations don't fully recognize. So how did you bridge that gap? And just reflecting back on your experience, is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. And interestingly, as Ed was talking there, I thought to myself, I am very much conscious that when I left service, and even till this point, it's very much a learning process for me as well. So by no means am I close to being halfway achievable of this. So when I say this, it's very much I'm living through this process as well. And this is to echo what Ed has said there. Often as service leavers or anybody that's got a wealth of knowledge and experience that they're bringing into a new industry or a new environment, we tend to limit ourselves. We tend to play down what we're capable of or what we bring in. And often it's limiting beliefs and it's limiting barriers. I wholly recognize that of myself. And so I'm trying to rectify that as I'm transitioning through and moving into a different space. So I wholly agree with Ed. It really is, and I'm coming to learn it now. And I've been out of service now 8 years, or coming up to 8 years. So I'm only at the very much start of not limiting myself in the experiences that I've had, and I'm using those platforms to really build my portfolio and showcase the transferable skills that I've developed in service, then I've moved into education with, that I continue to develop, and those experiences that I've gained. So I think sometimes it works twofold, really. We have to put some onus on the employers, and I think Theodora mentioned it previously about the employers changing and shifting their mindset in regards to looking at competency-based recruitment rather than just ticking a box. I think it's going to be expedited with AI, because I suspect now in service you've got a lot of we have a lot of technical roles anyway, so they're going to be a lot of individuals that are technically gifted, but those transferable skills are going to be sought after. So it's finding a way in which you can effectively showcase those transferable skills to employers. And I don't have the answer for individuals, but it's finding a way that works best for you. to bring and to echo Paul, the true version of yourself forward, because that's what employees are going to be looking for as we move forward. So there is some onus on employers to really drill down and recognize what it is that they want from their employees. Do they want a technical person, or do they want a person that has technical skills that also has that human element? Maybe a 60-40 split, 60 as in human element and 40 with the technical the technical ability. So we put that onus on the employees as well. But for those individuals leaving service, there is a responsibility there as well to really demonstrate your core competencies, your core skills, and what it is that you're bringing not only to the civilian sphere, but also to the working environment as well. And as we go through, we can see sort of a theme that is mirrored here. You know, the networking, the sort of showcasing your best ability, bring your best foot forward, so to speak. So sort of to summarize there, it's don't expect employees to really understand what skills you have without you being able to really showcase and demonstrate. And I think I've come to realize what you need to do is tell a story. Tell your story. What is your story? Find that thing that you're passionate about and build an authentic and organic story around that thing. And it could be anything. And, you know, and to sort of use an example there, it could be that you are a clerk within service and you're transitioning to the business world. Or build a story around that, and that story becomes your portfolio. The story isn't who you are, but it's what you bring. It's part of who you are, not the whole picture, as it were. But yeah, build a story around it. Utilize those platforms that are available to you to help build that story. There's a word that's been branded around recently, and I'm victim to it as well. It's become a thought leader. That's the word that's been branded around, become a thought leader. Now, we're not saying from an academic perspective, but I do agree with it, because that helps you reach a broader audience by sharing your thoughts around the things that you're passionate about, especially if it's coming from a place of truth and it's authentic and organic. Employees are going to see that.
I 100% agree with you, Jesse. I really think stories stick so much better than what we say in terms of our skills and our job titles. I don't know, Ed, Theodora, if you've got any questions around that. And I do want to quickly just bring in something that Donna said. I think this was really beneficial as well. She said, we are all networking to some degree every day. It's building relationships with the shopkeeper, the bus driver, the repairman, delivery drivers. When you explain this, people calm down. So I think that's a really good tip, actually, for those who may be feeling like it's something big to step into network, and that actually you're doing this every day. But before we shift, we're going to go into AI very, very soon. But before we shift to that, Ed, Theodore, anything else you want to add on to the back of what Jesse was explaining there about transition and stories?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on Jesse's points, but and also what Donna mentioned there is what we were saying at the very beginning. It's just breaking it down to networking being a human conversation, right? And they're the ones that we have hundreds of times during the course of the day. When we put expectations onto a human conversation, that's when they become very tricky, right? So, and that's maybe some of the mindsets of traditional networking, what that looked like. So I think Donna explained it great there, that we have hundreds of those conversations maybe in a week or a day. And that's all that networking looks like. Suppose just coming back to Jesse's point of view, where he talked about different perspectives. And I know that's really key, and that's what can make you stand out as a candidate. Because I know when I worked for a tech organization just after COVID, we actually looked for people with diverse backgrounds and different perspectives, because we didn't want people around the table that were just nodding heads because we came all from the same industry or from the same area. So also recognize that that's what recruiters are looking for. So even if your experience might be in something totally different than your career transition, doesn't mean you're not the right candidate. It may mean that you need a little bit more extra help with some of the technical skills, but then also with the AI that can assist us, that can help in this situation. But even before AI, you can always learn a technical skill. It's more about the human skills that you bring from your previous roles. And I loved hiring people from diverse backgrounds, from photographers to vets to people within business, because when you're in a table and you're having a discussion or you're working on a project, they'll all bring a different lens to that particular conversation. And that's exactly what corporations are looking for. And that's your competitive advantage going forward. So So, Jesse, you mentioned about telling stories. When you're telling a story through your CV application, that's where it's very much that you need to kind of get it down and get the train of thought and make sure that you're highlighting all the great things. But then when you do get the interview, that's where you showcase who Jesse is, because they're hiring Jesse and Ed based on, are they the best fit culturally? Maybe the technical piece we can add on, or we can add to it, because Ed might be able to bring more to the table. But you really want to be able to show them that value. So just wanted to touch on that about the different perspective, different transferable skills. A lot of people feel like if they're in one lane, they just need to talk about the lane that they're in. No, not anymore. Like, I've career pivoted 3 times during my 25-year career, and each time into very different industries, but I knew the value that I could bring into those industries and the impact that I could make. May not be, like for like, but at the end of the day, I'm dealing with people as well at the same time, and generally people in different areas are quite similar. That's just my take. Not sure if Theodora has a different view or anything else to add.
No, I really agree to you guys are saying, and I think storytelling is the best way for someone to remember you and show them from practical examples how, communication. I'm a very good communicator. Okay, how? Okay, so you tell a story, and that's how you bring it to life, and you show them, okay, he knows what he's talking about.
Excellent. And Ed, I just want to go back to your point on diversity. Great book, if nobody's read it, by Matthew Syed. Has anybody here read Black Box Thinking?
No. I've read Rebel Ideas.
I can see
Fantastic
it.
book.
Yeah, that kind of encapsulates a lot of stuff what we've just been talking about there. So if you haven't read it, add it to your list. It's a brilliant book. Now let's shift the conversation to AI. AI is the hot topic. It's been the hot topic for the past 2 years, possibly for the 5 years, 10 years to come. So the next question is, and I'm going to open this. I'm going to go to you first, Ed. Then we're going to open up to everybody. What do you think are the most important skills right now in this dawn of AI within the next 1 to 2 years that we need to possess? And we've talked about these a bit already, so maybe just sum up what we've talked about.
Yeah, I think we talked, for me and what I hear from the industry and bridging that gap between academia and employability. When I speak to a lot of different employers from different sectors, the main things that they're looking for is those human skills, right? And then what encompasses those is the communication skills, the relationship skills. Because I do feel sorry for graduates that are just entering the market at the moment, because when I was entering it, I don't want to give my age away, but when I was entering it, you did get a year or two to bed in, right? You got the opportunity to be an intern, or you got an opportunity to do maybe some of the lower tasks before you moved into a middle or a senior tasks. Moving forward, those entry level positions, they're nearly looking for somebody with maybe the 2-3 years experience that I would have had as zero experience moving in, if you get me. So they're challenged, because AI can look after some of those what they call an AI intern, and they can look after some of the automated tasks, or et cetera, et cetera. But still, we can bring those human skills. And for me, the two that I constantly hear is, first of all, is adaptability. So adaptability is the key kind of skill set, or human skill set, to bring across. And adaptability means being open to working with the different changes, being open to AI, and not just seeing it as a negative or a challenge. How do you use that as a co-worker or co-order, and how do you bring that in? So if you're a graduate or you're working in different industries, when you're telling your stories, you want to show how you've used that to help you to do A, B, C, or D, right? So you want to show that particular aspect of it. And then for me, what I'm hearing a lot about is judgment, right? So AI is going to give you a lot of information, but you still need to fact check it, you need to sense check it, and you need to make the right judgment calls, right? So you're not being hired just to type something into AI and then just reproduce that to your manager, right? You're meant to co-work with it and to understand where those opportunities are. And I see AI as a great tool to use it to challenge your own thinking, and to keep prompting, and to keep having conversations within that space, to be able to, and that's again part of your critical thinking. So use where people say AI is going to take away critical thinking. I don't think it'll ever take away that cognitive critical thinking piece. And I think you can constantly keep going back to AI to challenge it on its perspective and to make sure that the words at the very end is based around your thinking, but AI has helped you to structure it. So something that might have taken you 4 or 5 days to do before could take 20 minutes with AI, right? To still build out the framework, but then the time that you need to spend on it is really getting into that critical thinking, the judgment, and those skills that we mentioned, adaptability. So for me, that's what I'm hearing in the Irish UK landscape right now.
No, brilliant. And I want to steer this over to Theodora. Theodora, I wish I could pull up your slide, because I know you've just covered the top 10 skills from EY, and I believe critical thinking was one that sat on there. So I'd love to hear your perspectives to add on from Ed there.
I think we have an opportunity and a risk here, because you have a lot of people who will come in, see AI doing their job and be like, "Oh, lovely. I can copy paste this. I don't have to, I don't have to tell it that it's wrong. I don't have to double check where the links are. I don't have to, and what we always say also to organizations who have come to us and said, "We want to replace our people with AI." We always say the same thing. AI is an assistant, is the same thing as an entry-level junior officer that you would bring for any kind of job. Okay, you still have to check their work, you still have to challenge them, you still have to find the right instructions to communicate. We just call them prompts now, but it's the exact same thing, to communicate in order to get out of it what you want. So that means that written communication and instruction giving, which has always been a skill you needed, is still needed. Critical thinking is becoming even more increasingly important. And for new generations who will come in just with the AI in place, I'm afraid, I think there's a risk for them to develop that critical thinking and not just say, "Okay, I'm just going to type it in, whatever it says, just going to use it for my job." So I think that it's going to be very, very important. And I'm afraid more for new generations than generations before, because I think they had time to develop some of the reviewing and critical thinking skills. So I think that that's really important as we move forward. And the other thing I was going to say is that what was interesting for me is I was talking to a couple of interns, and I was doing a presentation for them about the future of work again. So so definitely, so one of the examples I was giving is, take your traditional farmer. Okay, he's in he's doing whatever any traditional farmer would do. Okay, planting vegetables and all of those things. Then you have the time of the one of the industrial revolutions happening. They have the machines. They're still needed because they need to operate those machines to go up and down the fields and all of those things. So their labor work gets reduced, but they're still needed. Okay. Now, in the era of AI, you could have drones just coming up with AI. They're reading the fields. They're going up and down. They're watering. Blah 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 blah. You still need a person that knows the ground, knows what time they need to nourish, knows what kinds of things they need to nourish in order to program the drone to come up and go at the time that it should, blah 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 blah. So at that point, I see that as an opportunity, not for a farmer to never have a job again, but for a farmer to need skills that a farmer never had before. So need education, need technology, need an analytical thinking, critical thinking, to still do the parts that his great great grandfather really liked and enjoyed, which was touching the soil to see how it is, knowing when to do what to the land, and all of those things, which will still be needed. But they're even more needed now because they're the interesting and important part rather than the repetitive labor task. So just for that example, for me, it's a very important thing to, it's very interesting, and I think it could be a very good thing if we do it the right way.
Jesse, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to slightly pivot from what Theodore and Ed has said. Then 100% agree with the practicality of individuals being able to basically rejuvenate skills lost. We see a lot of skills dying, lots of really good skills dying, and being able to regenerate those skills in the age of AI is really key. I'm just going to take two slight pivots there, and it's for the individual going into the workforce, especially in this dawn of AI, is their ability to study, to understand AI and its utility, and to be able to pivot between one AI tool and the other to make them consistently employable and working alongside an AI tool. Because what we've seen is lots of people know AI is there, either afraid of using AI for various reasons, or they use the wrong tool to do the wrong thing. So there is that as well. So it's being able to understand the tools that you're using as the individual, because AI isn't going away, and utilizing those tools effectively for the right role, for the right job. And obviously applying that human aspect to it, as Ed and Theodora has explained previously. I think also as well, touching on sort of what Theodore said previously with employers and just that mind shift into recruitment, it's also down to government to adjust policies around recruitment in relation to how they look at, or organizations look at recruitment, how they recruit with AI in mind, and what do applicants need to demonstrate for those roles, and for government to just help and guide organizations to have more effective recruitment in place in the age of AI. I think that's something that could be looked at as well. And the other thing is, what I'm seeing, especially working with employers, is the organizational knowledge gap. So employers, as Theodora says, I want to replace my workforce with AI. But 9 times out of 10, they don't know what tool they want, nor do they understand the implications of utilizing AI, because it's quite profound. There's automation, there's general use, etc., etc. So I think when organizations develop a really profound knowledge of the tools that they want and what they want that tool for, that might feed into better recruitment of their people as well, which will hopefully guide government, because we know they tend to be quite reactive when it comes to policy changes, as in that sphere as well. So I think there, just to summarize it, the individuals being able to understand the different AI tools and developing their own knowledge to stay in line with those changes is difficult. I appreciate it. There's quite a wealth of knowledge out there in order to allow that to happen. Government assisting with recruitment changing policies in line with the evolution of AI, how we better recruit and employ people. So we're looking at those core competencies around that, and also the improved organizational knowledge around the right and effective AI tools, not to dive in, I'm going to replace my workforce with AI and ultimately put a lot of people out of work, when actually it might have been a tool that could be used with a person that sits alongside that tool as well. So I think those 3 things in the dawn of AI probably will help us transition into appropriate and effective use, where we're not seeing massive unemployment as a consequence, as a knee-jerk reaction to embedding AI into the business.
No, I love that, Jesse. I think that's a really important point. And just to blend what both of you said there, I think one thing we don't talk enough about is education behind AI as well. I think it's really important that there is education piece around this. But I'm just conscious of time, and I want to get the last question in for today. So Theodore, I'm going to come over to you for the final question, and it kind of links us back to the topic of securing new roles. Does actually securing a new role exist today in our volatile employment landscape?
I think we had a great conversation that just answers it. But for me personally, and guys, feel free to disagree with me. I think there's no such thing as securing a role. There's such a thing as, I have this role now, for now. And what do I mean by that? And again, this is a risk and an opportunity. And it has to do a lot of with the mindset on which you will see this. So you may secure a role today that may not exist in 2 years. And also in 2 years, there are roles that we don't know will exist because the need for them hasn't come yet. The roles that our kids will have not been invented yet. So there's, with all of these things happening, there's no such thing as securing one role and staying through it. That doesn't mean that you're going to lose your job, though. It just means that that role that you've secured today will evolve tomorrow alongside you, if you choose to do that. Okay, you may say that, I'm securing this role, for example, I'm a trainer, and tomorrow AI is doing a lot of micro learning, and there's no need for you to be, let's say, to be a trainer in the sense that you had it in mind. You need to learn e-learning and how to use AI to make e-learnings and stuff like that. I may choose to evolve with that job, or I may say, you know what, I'm going to try a different career because that doesn't fit with me. Okay. That's fine. You can still go out, and we've discussed about, like, changing careers and the transferable skills you have. But there's no such thing anymore as securing one job and doing the exact same thing for the next 30 years. That's not going to happen. You'll need to evolve with it. And I think that's very exciting because what I wanted to finish my future of work and I couldn't is, in a world that's so disruptive and volatile, and you can be anything you can imagine, like, where does your imagination take you? Because it's a mindset thing. Like, if you can imagine doing anything, because this is what we're talking about, like, no disruptions, no stoppings of degrees and stuff, like, where do you imagine yourself? So yeah.
If I can just jump in there, I agree with a lot of what Theodore is mentioning, and maybe if I tie it in with some of the AI piece that we talked before, is again for me it's bringing about that adaptability piece. So if you do read anything in relation to this space, there's some great books out there. Ethan Mollick's one about co-intelligence is a great book around AI and the differences it will help and revolutionize the different technological spaces, etc. Another great one is from the former CEO of LinkedIn, Ryan Walensky, and he talks about that as well. And Theodore, what you're talking about there about securing a job now, there may be a couple of industries where you can be secured based on, like, especially in Ireland, if you go into civil service or if you go into An Garda Síochána, which is the police, etc., etc., there is a security there to a degree, right? But in relation to the other areas, there hasn't been, and I suppose this kind of concept of security has been coming up because of the recent layoffs in the tech space over the last 3 or 4 years, while the previous 10 or 15 years was really unheard of a layoff in tech. So it was never part of our vocabulary. So that's why we thought we had secure employment. Okay. But I suppose what you look at is, you look back at, and these are examples that would have been shared in a couple of those books, is you look back at the switchboard operators when they went out of work, where did they go? They adapted to other industries and other areas and brought those transferable skills across. Well before my time, we had knocker-uppers who would have knocked on windows to wake people up as human alarm clocks, right? When the alarm clock came in, we adjusted. I think the disruption here and the fear and the uncertainty and the conversations are had because this AI revolution is very different to other revolutions, because generally and traditionally other revolutions would impact low skilled workers, while AI is impacting high skilled workers, right? And that's traditionally not what happens, right? So in the industrial revolution, we bring in a machine that automates, where you don't have to have 5 people standing in the queue and putting one screw in the next screw, whatever it may be, on an automation line. Not saying that work isn't valuable, but it's low skilled work is what the terminology they would use. While you're seeing now a lot of high skilled workers are losing their roles or potentially part of their tasks. So I don't like to say roles or jobs, because it's not roles or jobs, it's your tasks within those roles or jobs. And as Theodore really mentioned there, is that in 10, not even 10 years, but maybe in 1 or 2 years, there's going to be jobs that we never knew of or didn't exist that now exist. And same with social media. If we asked people 25, 30 years ago, they wouldn't have had the concept of social media. So this is all about evolution in different ways. I suppose when you bring it back to the AI and the security piece, is that there's a lot of people who are in high paid, high skilled work that are impacted by this. And sometimes that can cause more of a conversation piece than some other revolutions that occurred in the past. They're just my thoughts. But just a lot of it is from the readings that I'm listening to and taking on as well, and then listening to the landscape and what employers are saying.
Now that nicely pulls everything together there, Ed. So thanks for that. And Jesse, I just want to invite you for any final thoughts before we bring the panel discussion to a close. With just over an hour, which is fine.
No, absolutely not. I think Ed and Theodora has summed up the landscape and the sort of final points there from Ed with regards to, it's not necessarily the job, but it's the task within that the pivot needs to occur, and utilizing those examples over the millennia of where jobs or roles has changed and evolved. I think that's a really important note to just sort of to remind people not to lose faith. Go out there, work, do well. Work, understand the landscape and pivot as appropriate. It's not necessarily that there won't be work. It just means those tasks that we have today, which is a great way of looking at it, which is what I will take back as well. So thank you for that, Ed. to the students, say it's not the task, it's not the job, it's a task that will evolve. And so it's finding a way to evolve with that task in the landscape as well, but not to be disheartened when we see the horror stories on the news to say that there's no work out there. It's what's the task? What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to achieve? I think what I've really enjoyed from this panel is just the underlying theme about the human aspect of it. It's bringing the person to the forefront of everything we do, especially entering into the workforce in the dawn of AI. I think that's a significant thing to hold on to as human beings as we move forward.
Excellent. No, thank you for that, Jesse. What came to my mind there, I'm sure you've all heard of this quote from Bruce Lee before, but to change with change is the changeless state. It's popped into my mind about 3 times from today's panel. So I just want to say thank you to you all. I've really enjoyed this discussion, listening to you all, your different diverse backgrounds, but tying everything. There's lots of similarities and trends between your thinking as well, which is wonderful. And I want to say a huge thank you to the audience as well, everyone who's tuned in. If you are watching on the replay and you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments box. If it's directed to a particular individual, so maybe you want to ask Ed a question or Jesse or Theodora a question, please just at them as well, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, YouTube or Facebook, and I'm sure they will be more than open to answer your questions. So a huge thank you, Ed, Jesse, Theodora. Really enjoyed today's discussion, and I look forward to connecting with you all very, very soon. Have a wonderful rest of the day, evening, wherever you are in the world, everyone, and speak to you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.